Welcome back to Doctors and Litigation, the L Word. I'm Gita Pensa. This is Season 2, Episode 10. Recently, I was at a hospital doing a workshop, and before the workshop started, when we were all just sort of milling around, someone asked me about what I did as a coach. And I replied that really I helped people both prepare for litigation practically in terms of transferring skills, but also think about their thinking about litigation and to help them shift into more helpful and constructive mindsets. And he answered, I've always been a pretty happy guy. I've never really felt the need to do therapy or coaching or anything like that. So there were lots of people in the room. Some had gone through litigation. There were some attorneys, lots of stakeholders. And during the presentation, I was talking about, among other things, the value of early mindset work in litigation. And I was giving them some simple reframes. One that I like to use a lot is to have people say these two phrases to themselves and see what feelings come up. And the first is, I'm getting sued. All right, you as a listener can probably get what those feelings might be. Now say to yourself, I have to defend myself in a lawsuit. Does that feel different to you? I'm getting sued versus I have to defend myself in a lawsuit. The fact of the matter is the same. You are involved in litigation. But can you feel a shift in the feelings those two sentences create in your mind? I'm getting sued. What does that feel like? It feels like you are at the effect of it, that you are a victim of it. I have to defend myself creates another feeling altogether. It may not be a great feeling, but I bet it feels a little different to you than I'm getting sued. This is how a subtle change in thought can change how you feel, even if it's in a subtle way. But that change in how you feel can change the things you do or do not do. It can change your attitude. It can change how you show up in litigation, in a conversation, in a relationship, in your work, in the world. This is the basic idea behind thought work. After that presentation, the same person came up to me and said, I think I might have some blind spots. There probably are some places where I could work on my thinking. Today, I want to introduce you to how I think of thought work, and that the best time to do it and to learn more about it and to get better at it is when you're feeling like life is pretty good. Now, most of the time when I'm teaching it to people, they're in distress. But what I'd like to do is to take you through a very practical analogy using our physical health as an example. Every doctor and every clinician that takes care of patients knows that there are many facets to physical health, and they all intertwine. Some of it has to do with genetics. A lot has to do with what patients put into their bodies and what they do with their bodies, how aware they are of their own health and what healthy behavior is, how actively they monitor and maintain their health, what they do when they get sick. I mean, it's complicated and there are a lot of factors, but in general, the more attention one pays to the maintenance of one's physical health, regardless of their starting point, the better off they're going to be. These people might get sick less often or bounce back faster from illness or injury, for example. And every argument you can make for maintaining your physical health, you can make for mental health. Thinking about mental health, for many of us, has been relegated to this place where we do not think about it unless we are actively hurting or ill. When we are suffering so much that we finally acknowledge that we need quote-unquote help, and even then, unfortunately, some of us don't get that help. I remember once taking care of a person in the ER who came in with this giant, fungating, cancerous mass that had eaten away nearly a whole side of his torso, all the flesh around it. It was huge. He had actually had to alter his clothes to accommodate this mass. I can't describe this thing. And when I talked to him, I asked as gently as possible if he had had any care for this problem before. And he just shrugged and said, it finally started hurting a lot so I thought I should have it looked at. Virtually every point that you can make for how to address or improve physical health, you can make for mental health, including the idea that frequent and early attention to it is the best thing you can do. It won't ward off every catastrophe, but it will certainly make your daily existence much better. And your future self will benefit from what you did today. So today I'm going to be introducing you to the idea of thought work, which takes a lot of forms, and make analogies that I hope everyone can understand about why it's better to use and maintain these skills over time, and that the best time to start trying it out is today, no matter where you are in terms of your overall mental health. And I really want to ask the question, how did it come to be that the only time we say the phrase mental health, we are talking about poor mental health? I mean, what defines excellent mental health? What should we be striving for? We all know that we want normal cholesterol, strong muscles, healthy teeth and bones. We should do cancer surveillances and skin checks and preventative care. And when something goes wrong, get it addressed early. We should care about what we put into our bodies. We should recognize that it can be fuel or poison. We should understand the effects that those inputs have. And we know that a problem that is unnoticed will go unaddressed and usually get worse. So I want to make the argument to you that even if you are not acutely suffering, even if you feel like your mental health today is good, it might be a good idea to learn more about how to optimize your mental health, how to optimize your thinking, how to optimize your inner life, because you have one. You don't have to be sick. You don't have to have a problem that needs to be addressed, but it will lead to overall less suffering and more satisfaction. And I use the term satisfaction because mental health is a lot more than just feeling happy. It is not normal to be happy all the time, nor is it healthy to pretend that you are happy all the time. So to keep this analogy going, to me, a person who has optimal mental health can do a lot of the same things that an optimal functional human body can do. You've probably heard the term functional fitness before. It's training of the body that mimics what you do in daily life to help optimize the things you do. Lifting, climbing, twisting, you name it. When you think about functional fitness of a human body, what characteristics does that athletic body have? Well, we have things like strength, endurance, flexibility or mobility, agility, adaptability, balance, and speed. There are definitely more, but I'm just talking in terms of athleticism. A body that can perform at peak functional fitness. And the way we would measure that is to see what can this body do when presented with certain challenges. I think a measure of functional mental health, functional mental fitness, is how well does your mind do when presented with certain challenges. It is not all about being happy and relaxed all the time. It is, what can you do when presented with certain challenges? How do you carry the load? How do you endure? How fast can you adapt? How flexible is your thinking? You are starting to see where I'm going with this analogy. And the best way to improve at these is by starting in lower stakes situations. For both of these endeavors, the pursuit of physical health and the pursuit of mental health, which are inextricably linked, even though I am talking like a doctor and pretending they are separate, for the pursuit both of physical health and the health of the mind, the goal is to live a longer and happier life, a more satisfactory life, but you cannot attain that level of health if you only do the work when you are sick, or if you only pay attention when you're suffering. Now, once upon a time, I thought that the idea of quote-unquote personal development or self-help or psychology, all of that stuff I thought was just bunk. I was a happy, pretty well-adjusted person until life handed me something that I did not know how to handle. And for the most part, I was willfully ignorant of any strategies that would have made me better. I was insistent that I could just DIY my way out of this in my own echo chamber of a mind filled with terrible thoughts. Would I read a book? No. Would I go to therapy? No. Would I ask for any external help or direction? No. I was the mental health equivalent of that patient I saw in the ER, and my heart just goes out to him. But I needed that degree of suffering in my mind before I started looking anywhere outside of myself for help and learning what in fact could be done. And what I realized is, man, I could have started this a lot earlier. Just like physical health, the more you integrate these habits of mind into your life, the easier they get and the more compounded the benefits. Every functional body is extraordinarily complex, as we all know, and has systems upon systems that rely on each other to work optimally. When one system is not working right, the whole body suffers. And this is also true for your brain and your mind health. But I'm going to stick with talking about the outputs here and go back to the analogies of strength, endurance, flexibility, speed, balance, etc., and point out that your mind similarly has these types, these ways of thinking. Just like bodies, we tend to be stronger in some areas than others. And you could say, oh, I'm just not a fast person, and never work on getting faster, and you will stay not fast. And even if you think your body is strong, if you do not work on maintaining that strength, it will atrophy. Use it or lose it is true of bodies, and it's true of minds. And I don't just mean cognitive abilities. I mean all the things your mind can do. So, sort of funny story. Many years back, after I had my kids, I was complaining of right-sided back pain. And as usual, I did not do anything about it except complain for a long time and try to sort of DIY stretch my way out of it until it got so bad that I finally went to physical therapy. And the PT did all sorts of tests of function and made some comments about my hips being wonky and then poked my right glute and told me to squeeze it. And I could not. I was like looking all around the room like, am I doing it? Am I doing it? And I'm like squeezing my hamstring and arching my back, and I am not squeezing my glute at all. So she said, oh, you have gluteal amnesia. And I can remember thinking this PT is an idiot. That is not a thing, because I'm a doctor and I would know about that. And well, who was the idiot? There is indeed such a thing, which happens from a lot of sitting and mostly unawareness of the fact that you are not using your glutes properly. And then your brain literally forgets how to make your butt cheek contract. I kid you not. Once upon a time, my body knew how to fire a glute, but like just on my right side because of my post-childbearing wonky hips, my brain stopped being able to make it go. The start of all of this back pain was my unawareness. And I only became aware once I had pain because I was not paying attention to the right things. Similarly, your brain can have amnesia, and I'm not talking here about memory loss and soap operas. I'm just using this as an analogy to say your brain will forget how to do things that you don't ask it to do. Your mind will forget how to do things that you do not ask it to do. Are you using short-form social media all day? Your brain will not be able to read a long and complicated research paper unless you reintroduce that activity, which your brain will not like because that will feel like change and work. But if you do it again and again and again, you'll get it back. But you know what else? You can numb your emotions so much that you forget how to feel them. A lot of us struggling with burnout or litigation stress have joy amnesia. We have silliness amnesia. We have curiosity amnesia. We just don't use these things. We bury them, and then we lose the ability to feel them. They atrophy. But the good news is, just like my glute, you can learn to fire them again. But the first step is awareness that they have been suppressed. Every person is better at some things on this functionality list than others. But working on the things they aren't so great at Well, that's how you become a more well-rounded athlete or just have an all-around healthier body. Likewise, all of us have styles of thought that are great, that work well for us, and things that we're not so great at. You might have a lot of grit and determination, which I would think of in the strength category, but maybe not have the flexibility of thought or adaptability of spirit to look for a new solution when things aren't working. The first key is awareness of what optimal mental health looks like, what optimal mental performance looks like, and then we can start working towards it. So let's stick with this analogy. I know that some of you are finding this to be a bit of a stretch, but let's look at each of these. Obviously, this is all open to a lot of interpretation, but let's start somewhere to think about the functions of our minds. And remember that these are all things that we can improve on with deliberate practice and repetition, right? So, okay, let's talk about strength. So in physical terms, this means having a musculoskeletal system that can carry and move heavy things, right? The way you cultivate physical strength is by exposing your muscles and tendons and ligaments to stress repeatedly. Now, if it's too much weight at once, you are going to hurt something. But if you train with gradually increasing resistance, you can carry heavier and heavier loads comfortably. Okay, what does this look like for the mind? Well, there are lots of ways to talk about strength of the mind, right? Bravery, grit, stick-to-itiveness, determination. And none of these are cultivated by the avoidance of stress or resistance. If you avoid all discomfort and pain, you will not develop mental strength. It is in the increasing of your tolerance to distress, resistance, that you gain strength. If it's too much at once, it will be traumatizing. But if it's something that you can rise to the occasion to meet, it can be transformative. Richard Rohr once said, "People who have had no inner struggles are invariably both superficial and uninteresting. Without resistance and struggle, you will not gain strength." You know that the bones of astronauts in space get so much weaker because they're not asked to perform. The roots of trees that grow in artificial spheres that don't have wind don't grow strong root systems because they don't get to grow against the resistance. Resistance is key. You need discomfort in order to cultivate strength, whether of the mind or the body. Okay, now let's think about endurance. So the way to train for physical endurance is to gradually add on the length or distance of the activity, and it will feel uncomfortable. For our minds, this can look like working on our attention spans, working on our persistence or grit, having a higher frustration tolerance, and cultivating the ability to hold uncertainty. We hate uncertainty. Handling uncertainty for long periods of time is necessary to thrive during litigation and also a skill that you can cultivate, as is paying attention or sticking with a goal. Mental endurance is something that you can train for. Flexibility. We all know that it's really important to have a flexible body. You could have a lot of strength, but if you don't have flexibility of your tendons, of your joints, you're probably going to hurt something. Similarly, strength of mind is very important, but sometimes you also need flexibility. Flexibility is what's going to help you realize when a change of course is necessary, when you might want to consider new information, when you might want to revise your thinking. Flexibility is as important as strength in certain situations. Okay, agility. Now, you all know agility of the body. You've certainly seen those dogs in these obstacle courses. Those are my favorite videos, by the way. But agility of the mind could have a lot of forms. It could look like creativity and problem solving, or applying old constructs in new ways, applying old ideas to new places. I am a fan of Susan David's book, Emotional Agility. Emotional agility is really the ability to stop ourselves from automatically reacting to our emotions and instead intentionally choosing how we respond to them, deciding how we want to respond to them. And this is a part of thought work. You can actually get better at noticing and feeling and then moving through emotions with deliberate practice. Your emotions don't have to control all the things that you do and you do not do. Your emotions don't have to drive the bus. The cultivation of these agile ways of thinking is something that you can actively work on. When we talk about speed of the mind, we could be talking about cognitive abilities, but we also could be talking about how quickly do you recover from a setback? What's your resilience like? How quickly can you apply these other constructs? How quickly can you realize that you need to be flexible? How quickly can you decide, I need to apply more strength? How quickly can you read a room? And for balance, you could think for the body, this is like proprioception, where you are in space. Can you hold your position in it, etc.? And the mind has its own sort of proprioception. It tends to be almost more like a compass, which your values and your identity can direct. Who am I? What do I care about? What should be guiding my decisions? I mean, it could also mean balance in terms of lightness and darkness, negative and positive emotions, centering inwards, connecting outwards. You get my drift. But you can probably intuit that some degree of balance in your thoughts and your emotions is healthy. Now, when you put all these things together, whether you're talking about the mind or the body, the prize, in my mind, the best possible outcome is adaptability. I mean, evolution is not about survival of the fittest, really. When you think about it, it's about survival of the most adaptable. And when you can cultivate all of these skills of the mind and know when the right time is to apply which, you will be truly more adaptable. What are you facing in your life right now that you wish you could show up differently for? Do you feel like I am always like X, I am always like Y? Do you recognize that your strength of mind sometimes may manifest more as inflexibility or stubbornness? Would you be willing to try to cultivate some flexibility of thought? I mean, we all have scripts about who we are and how we quote unquote normally behave, but being willing to first recognize and then consciously step out of patterns is the first step to changing and to strengthening these other skills of mind. If you're normally reserved, the first time you raise your hand in class, it is completely anxiety producing and your brain is saying, no, don't do it. But you do it anyway. And then it gets easier each time you do it. Bravery can be learned and reinforced. Flexibility can be tried deliberately and then practiced, just like a stiff person going to yoga. It does take willingness. It does take awareness. And it does take the courage to do something quote unquote out of character for you. So this to me is one way to think about thought work, which is derived from cognitive neuroscience and cognitive behavioral therapy and acknowledges our brain's neuroplasticity and ability to grow and change and evolve with attention and intentionality. There are specific frameworks of thought work and specific exercises that you can use to try to cultivate these various things that we've been talking about. But the very basics of thought work are acknowledging that our thoughts aren't facts. Even our beliefs about ourselves and the world are not fixed facts. But these thoughts can drive our emotions, and oftentimes it's our emotions that drive the things that we do and don't do in the world, which add up to our results and the things that happen in your life. Thought work at its essence is aimed at deliberately noticing, being mindful, noticing and eventually influencing our thoughts. And yes, I promise you that is possible over time. It is possible to gradually change the things that you believe within reason, even about yourself. And emotional agility is that recognition that your emotions don't have to drive everything that you do, but you can look at them as data. Asking yourself, what is the function of this emotion that you're having? What is it trying to tell you as objectively as possible? And choosing how you decide to react to it. The whole purpose of thought work is to really move us out of reactivity, from being at the effect of our circumstances all the time and having so little control over our inner lives, to move us out of autopilot, to move us into a place where we can respond intelligently and deliberately and meaningfully. Will this happen overnight? No. Will you be able to do it sometimes and not other times eventually? Yeah. But you will have more awareness about why you do the things you do, and that awareness will lead to the possibility of stepping out of patterns, of working on the things that you want to change. Allow me to give you a low-stakes example. Let's say that I notice a pattern that every time my partner comes home a little late, I lose my mind. I yell at him, I pick a fight, and that happens so many times that now things are getting frosty between us. Nobody's really happy. So in a time when I'm not feeling emotionally reactive, I can step back and think about what is happening. I first notice the pattern. Stimulus, response. He's late, I pick a fight. But as the great Viktor Frankl noted, between stimulus and response, there is a space. What thought work says is that in that space, after a stimulus, is a thought about that stimulus and a feeling that the thought creates, and the feeling drives the response. Let's work backwards. If the response is, I lose my mind, what is the feeling that drives that response? Well, it's probably something like anger or maybe even rage. What kind of a thought drives rage? Well, in this scenario, it's not just, my partner's late. It's probably more than that. If you dig a little deeper, the thought might be, my partner doesn't care about me, or my partner doesn't respect my time, or my partner doesn't listen to me. I've told him that I want him to be home on time. That could add up to, my partner doesn't care about me. My partner doesn't even love me. Now you can see where the heightened emotion comes from. All of that from the stimulus of my husband being late. If the thought were instead something like, gosh, I know how hard it is to get out of clinic. I bet he was trying really hard. Or traffic is super bad this time of day. It must be really difficult. I bet he's really stressed because he knows I want him to be here on time. The feeling that comes out of that is probably not rage. The feeling that comes out of those thoughts is probably something a little more compassionate. You might not be thrilled, but you might not be losing your mind. The action that comes out of that is probably not that you're going to pick a fight. Maybe you'll have a discussion later. Maybe you'll just give him a hug and say, I bet that was tough getting home. And then the end result is probably that you have a better understanding of one another, not that your relationship is getting frostier. If you have the power to be aware of the thoughts that are driving your feelings and the resultant actions, you have the power to, in the moment, try to actively shift your thoughts. Now, it has to be something that you could think could be true, and usually a small shift is easier. But if you do this exercise at a time when you are not in that situation, when you are not feeling emotionally heightened, you can sometimes identify the thought that you would like to be trying to shift into in that moment. And it's not going to happen instantly, but if you can recognize when you are in that cycle again and stop the cycle, that's the first step. The next step, and maybe it's not even this time, would be to try to thought shift into the thought that you have already thought when you weren't activated. And sometimes it's really a far reach for that time. And sometimes the closest you can get is maybe my husband's not a complete jerk. Maybe he was trying. Maybe he does love me. And this example obviously is a really oversimplified example. If you're in a situation like this, there's all sorts of nuance and there's been conditioning, and maybe this really is some sort of untenable situation. Thought work is not meant to be used as a tool against yourself. And it's never something that ought to be done with a feeling of should. I should change the way I think. I should do this. I should do that. Should always implies judgment and some sort of societal expectation. Thought work is really meant to be used when you want to show up a different way than you have been. When your higher, wiser mind tells you when the right thing for you in accordance with your values is to change some way that you have been showing up in the world. When you want to develop a new habit of thought or habit of behavior. When that's something that you believe is going to make you better. That's what this is for. And I don't want to oversimplify this approach to thought work, nor do I want you to think that that's all there is to it. And as with many things, it may sound simple, but it's really not easy. What I want to do in this podcast is just sort of open your eyes to the fact that there are tools and practices and all sorts of things out there that you can try to improve your mind, just the same way that a lot of us strive to improve our health, and that it is something that you should think about. So this is an invitation for you to start exploring all of these possibilities, to learn more about the science of the mind and figure out how to apply it to your own lives. There's tons of resources out there. There are podcasts and YouTube videos from really reputable psychiatrists and neuroscientists and psychologists. There are books, a wealth of things now, more than ever, that you can start to experiment with to see if these are things that you can use, that you can practice with. Now, not everything is going to apply to you, but sometimes you're going to find some tools that are really helpful. Or you can work with a professional coach or a professional psychologist, therapist. There are so many things that you can do. But again, the first step is to be aware that you can improve your mind, and that doing that is probably a really smart thing for you to do. I offer you the possibility that awareness and the deliberate cultivation of skills can change the things that happen in your life. They can change your relationships. They can change your relationship to work. They can change your relationship to litigation. They can change your ability to weather a difficult circumstance. They can pull you out of joy amnesia, silliness amnesia, curiosity amnesia. All you have to do first is recognize, pay attention, and become aware of the richness of your inner life and the importance of not waiting until you are suffering to think about it. All right, everyone, that's it for today. I'm taking off my coaching hat. Thanks for sticking with me, and I hope I've given you some introductory things to mull over. Remember that this is not medical or psychological advice. I'm a coach. This information is meant to be educational and informative, but not directive. I'll see you all in our next podcast.